You're at Lake Rant, where I found the proper sunglasses again, and where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one is going to be for Hunter Harris, who says to rant about Machine Girl and the state of modern industrial music. If this isn't something you're interested in, rant about tiny houses. And then links to a Machine Girl song, and I gotta say, it was pretty fucking killer. The song linked to was called Status. It's from the 2018 album, The Ugly something. I don't fucking remember already, but it was some lit fucking shit, and it caused me to go listen to more of the album. Now, of course, have heard of Machine Girl because the Wolf Girl album was posted a lot on Mew right around the time that I was heavily using Mew, so I remember giving it a listen and not having been that into it because it kind of was a little too synthetic, a little too thin for my taste, whereas this newer album has live drums and is just more fucking combative and in-your-face feeling compared to my memory of the old album. But I was listening to it and I thought it sounded pretty badass, and I couldn't help but inevitably think of Death Grips, because I was like, there's a lot of Death Grips sound in here. Which is funny because, like, I'm somebody who complains about people comparing too many things to Death Grips, but I was, like, shocked after listening to a couple songs that I hadn't heard Anthony Fantano talk about this album. I'm like, this is killer shit. Why didn't he review it? So I found his Why You Know review, and literally the reason he didn't review it was because it sounded too much like Death Grips, and it was distracting to him. And I was like, okay, so I'm not going crazy here. Like, a lot of the sound palette is definitely sounds that are, like, exactly sounds that Death Grips have used, or even just, like, parts of songs that just sound like they were ripped right out of a Death Grips song. But unlike Fantano, I don't really see that as something necessarily to complain about. I mean, it's kind of like saying that, it's a problem that two different rap artists used the same sample, or that, two different rock bands use the same guitar tone. It's like, you're inevitably going to run into this if you're creating electronic music. Maybe it's just because Death Grips sounds had seemed so unique and so new when they used them that, for anybody else to use them, that's inevitably the point of comparison. But it's possible that some of those sounds are going to be used enough that they won't feel unique anymore. I don't know where these sounds are pulled from. I don't know how you could create something that sounds so similar to something that Death Grips used unless they just are both pulling from a, sample pack that has some of these sounds in them. It's certainly most similar to their, heavier, more chaotic songs. And I dig it. I mean, it's different enough from Death Grips in that it's, first of all, not hip-hop. It's industrial music with lots of screamed, crazy vocals. It's overall more shrill, more pummeling. The songs change constantly in a way that Death Grips songs usually don't. Death Grips songs have more pop song structures for the most part. I mean, this is like closer to stuff that sounds like Hothead or something off of steroids. But even then, Death Grips usually goes for somewhat more of a structured sound than this album has. It's just kind of blistering and fucking intense. I have not listened to the entire thing yet, but the songs I heard, I generally liked. I don't think I would listen to this very often because it is so fucking chaotic and intense that it really takes a certain headspace to listen to. But I was totally digging everything that was going on. I mean, I am a huge fan of Death Grips. I'm not really going to complain if you have done a reasonably good job of, using those same kinds of sounds to do something, somewhat different with it. So yeah, I was feeling it. As for the state of modern industrial music, I mean, I've never been like a huge follower of industrial. My mom was a big industrial fan in like the late 80s, early 90s. She listens to like a lot of My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, Revolting Cocks, and Ministry, and like, that the kind of heavy fucking industrial, Nine Inch Nails, of course. And, with a lot of those older bands, like, I appreciate the sound palettes, like the crushing noises, the really heavy sound, the imagery and subject matters of their songs that are often very crass and just, hard hitting. But the songs were often really repetitive. It's really just listening to a beat on loop with, like, sprinkles of samples and stuff thrown on top. And I'm not the biggest fan of like repetitive music, whether it be this or like more house music or stuff like that. Just anything that kind of just loops the same thing over and over again. I tend to get tired of it pretty quickly. So I feel like a lot of the newer industrial just seems like it's more chaotic, more intense, more fixated on cramming as much sound and as many changes into it as possible. At least if Machine Girl is indicative at all of the current scene of industrial, that would certainly be the case. I mean, I would even say that a band like Mindless Self-Indulgence comes to mind as something that was like influenced by industrial, but created something more chaotic and like changing styles, throughout the course of a single song. Machine Girl reminds me more of that in a way. So I don't know if that's just the natural evolution of how things went, but like I feel like early industrial was more about just playing around with the noises you could make. It was less about song crafting and more about sound crafting, and like even like early Nine Inch Nails, who did create like songs, like fully realized songs that could be on the radio that weren't as repetitive and had a little bit more going on. Like the biggest appeal of Nine Inch Nails is the unique sound palettes, the way that he plays around with the production and everything, especially on newer Nine Inch Nails albums, which are very much about like where everything kind of sits in the speaker. It's not quite like that on this Machine Girl album. It's much more pummeling and intense, and again, Death Grips-esque. I think that we're seeing more industrial fused with other genres rather than just being just straight industrial. I mean, this album, if you described it to me as just an industrial album, I don't think I would imagine this. I mean, I don't find these kind of genre labels to be all that helpful, except in determining something's musical lineage. So in that sense, yes, it's interesting. Death Grips wasn't the very first thing that came to mind when I listened to this either. I did think of like my mom's industrial music and stuff, but like it's interesting to think that the lineage would have gone in this direction. And I guess I'm all for it. I can certainly say I like this more than a lot of the older industrial that I've heard, but I'm not the most well versed in the genre. So there you go.